Okay, so Davinci Resolve has some pretty sophisticated text tools, but the truth is the basic title tool is all you're going to need for 90% of your videos. So I'm going to show you how to use that. I'll show you how to use a couple of the simpler Fusion text tools within the edit page. And lastly, I'm going to show you the trick that everyone loves and put your text behind your subject using a very easy method in the color page. So we'll start with the basics first. If you come over to the effects panel, go to titles and just use the normal basic title text. Now, to be honest, I still use this for about 90% of my text needs in Davinci, so it is a little powerhouse. Hey, once you've got your text selected, you can come over here and type in your title. I'll just call this one something very cheesy. So the font isn't that nice. I'm going to choose a different font. So I'm going to go for Roboto today, and then I'm going to go for medium on this one. Now you can also play with the size. I'm going to make this about here. So one tip, you don't want your text to be too big on the screen. It just doesn't look very professional most of the time. You can do it that way, but I think smaller text looks more professional. Tracking is another one to play with. It just pulls the text apart from each other. Obviously you have your position, your zoom, your rotation angle. I'm going to position this one higher above at the top. And we also have the stroke as well. So if you want to add a stroke to your text, you can do that. Change the color. And then you can also put it on the outside only, so it doesn't affect the font sizes, which I recommend doing outside only if you are going to use a stroke. But again, stroke is something to use sparingly, mainly if you need to use it for subtitles to stand out or if it's a cartoon or something, but I wouldn't really use it on anything more professional. Drop shadow is something that I do use all the time because you need to make your text stand out. So if we come over to drop shadow here, you have to change the offset so you can actually see it. Bring it off a little bit, maybe bring it down. And now it makes it stand out a lot more from the background. You can play with the blur, so you can have a larger blur, or you can bring the blur down completely so it comes down to more of a 3D sort of imaging, especially if you bring the opacity all the way up and then play with the offset. But for me personally, I just like it to stand out a tiny bit, so I'd bring the opacity quite far down and increase the blur, and that just gives it a little bit of a pop from the background, especially if you turn it off and on and increase the blur a little bit more. So now you can't really tell that there's anything on it, but when you remove it and put it back on, you can see it there. And I think that looks a lot more professional, personally. It just makes it pop. And then we have the background. So the background just does what it says. It adds a background to your text. To see the background, you have to make sure that the height has something there. So bring the height up. And now you have your background where you can change the opacity to make it a full stripe, or you can lower it so you can barely see it and it just stands out from the text. Now this is good for things like if you're doing corporate videos, obviously you want some explanations on it, and you can put it on the bottom when there's a lot going on the screen. It'll make it stand out from that. Now you can play around with the corner radius as well. A corner radius, I love the tiny corner radius where you can barely tell it's there. You can make the width the full length of the screen, or you can make it just over your text, and you can change the center around as well. All of these can be keyframed. So just as an example, if I wanted this to be my final look, I could come to the end, make sure I'm on the last frame, keyframe the width and the height, and then go back to the start and then make the width 0 and make the height 0 and then press play. I'm just going to reset that because I don't want a background on here. If your text isn't on the first frame of an image like this, you don't want it to just pop in and then pop out. So if you drag your timeline up a little bit so you can see the text bigger and come to the white handle, you can pull it across and add a fade in and pull this one so you can add a fade out. Okay, so our next quick one is an effect that a lot of people use, and that is on the text plus. So I'm just going to drag text plus over my footage. The cool thing about the text plus is it's a little bit more advanced. So all the things you had before, like your size, tracking, you can now put keyframes on it. So if I wanted to pull this text apart while it was on the screen, I could add a keyframe here for where I want it to end up, which is maybe a little bit wider just to show it better, which is there, and come back to the start and put it back down to 1. So there you go. Now you have some keyframes and some more animations for your text. You also have something that's used quite a lot, especially for social media reels, and that is the write-on effect. So the write-on just basically works like it's a typewriter. So if you go to the start of your clip, drag this over and add a keyframe, and then go forward a few frames, and then add on, make it to the end, and it just adds on a little typewriter effect. If you do use something like this, sound is obviously what makes it work. it just gives a little bit more emphasis onto the write on. Another one we have is the multi-text, which is good if you want more than one text section on screen at a time, but you don't want to have a bunch of text boxes over the top of each other. So again, like the Text Plus, it is a Fusion style text, but you don't have to go into the Fusion tab to use it. So it's the same kind of idea. Choose your text, and then you come to the layout tab to change where it is with the center. So if you come over to the layout, you have different types of types. So the first one is point, which if you put on your Fusion overlay, you can see it's just a point in the middle of the text. That's the anchor point. It has the text box, which will make sure that everything stays within this text box. Now you can wrap it to the text box or not wrap it to the text box so it goes outside. But this means that whenever you're typing more things in, it will just carry on and stay in there. You can see everything stays around, and you can move the text box around like this as well. I'd take the tracking off if I was going to use it, and then bring the size down a lot in the same, so we could have it in the corner and just have some explainer text right on. So you can also change the size of the text box as well if you wanted to, and the width, so if we wanted it in the middle, and the height. It also has something like called the circle, which is, you know, something that you probably would never use. But if you wanted to, it's there. Just put it all on one line for this. And then you'd play around with the size until it fit your circle properly. Again, the cool thing you could do is you could keyframe it, size there, and then bring the size all the way around, turn off the overlay. You know, just extra things that you can do with that kind of stuff. And you don't have to go into Fusion. Okay, so now another bit, you could add a subtitle to this and completely change the way it looks independent from our first text box. And you do that by coming to the add text. So I'll just add a point layout again, and then it'll open up a new text box for you. If you want to go back to the old one, you can just click it here. And let's call Field of Dreams by David. Most of the time you're going to want to use the same font at a different point. So I'll go light, play the side down a little bit, and then I'd change the center. And there we go. Now we can just play around with this, and at least it's in the same text box, and I don't have to play around with having multiple layers for the same thing. And now we have the shading tab, which is also available in Text Plus, just to show you. And this is just where you can add different effects to your text. You know, you can change the colors, different parts. You can add a glow. So again, if you wanted to keyframe a glow in, you can add outlines here as well. You can add a different one to this one, or you can match it. And if you play around with it, you can get some pretty cool things out of this. Now let's go back to our basic text. Okay, so what about if we wanted our text to be behind the main character on the screen? First of all, I would Alt-Shift-Click or Option-Shift-Click and drag that up just so it stays at the same level, and we have 2 copies of our main clip. Come over to the color tab, and then on the timeline, make sure you have the top one selected. We're going to come over to the AI Magic Mask, which we're already on. Make sure that the overlay is on, and then add a mask around this guy. Just press the plus. I'm just going to swap this to better. It doesn't have to be amazing, obviously. You'd spend more time refining the mask, and then I'm just going to track forwards and backwards. Right click over here, add alpha output, and drag the blue to the blue, and just turn off the mask overlay. Then I'm going to come back to my edit tab and drag this footage that we just masked out over the top of my text. And there we go. Now the text is behind him, and it will reveal as he moves around. Just to finish it off, I might add a subtle zoom in here. Now when you get a bit more advanced, you can learn about tracking the text to the background so it would move with the footage, but this is something we'll come to later.